Can you tell your name, designations, and what's your role in the company?
So my name is Leila Hotait. I'm a principal with Booz & Company. We're a management consulting firm in the Middle East, and I focus on human capital development, so on education, but also on women economic empowerment.
Could you please tell about your background and all?
Sure. I'm an Arab woman. I'm Lebanese by background. And if I had to think about a common trait in my background, it's been being in male-dominated environments. So in terms of education, I chose a scientific track. I went and I did electrical engineering at Imperial College. I then worked in R&D in electrical engineering, writing patents. Then did an MBA and then management consulting with Booz & Company, first in Europe and then in the Middle East. And throughout, it's been very much male-dominated environments that I've been working in.
How did you become this interested in topics of working women is concerned?
A few years ago, I was asked to lead the internal diversity initiative at Booz & Company to look at how we can recruit, develop, retain more women at Booz. And during this, I started looking at what other companies were doing, what were the challenges in various countries, and that's what prompted the interest in that topic.
Who are the third billions?
So there are about 865 million women who could enter the global economy by 2020 if they were properly enabled and properly prepared. And so we talk about the third billion in reference to the billion population of China, the billion population of India. So this is the third billion, this group of women who, if we prepared properly, i.e. educated properly, if we enabled properly, i.e. we gave them the right access to market, could really have a big impact on the global economy.
The next question is, why is there such interesting topics of the business people and policymakers to understand? What outcome depends on one woman's contributions?
Sure. It's a very important topic for policymakers and business leaders to understand because it can have a substantial impact on the economy. Our estimates show that if you raised female level of participation to male level of participation, you could get significant GDP per capita impact. For example, 34% in Egypt, 12% in the UAE. On the ground, how would this happen? This would happen on the ground by having, first of all, you're choosing from a bigger talent pool, so you can have the best talent working. You have more women starting their own businesses, so that's new jobs created. And when you have dual careers, when you have women working, you have much more disposable income, so you have more consumers and you have a bigger economy. In addition to GDP per capita, or in addition to economic impact, you have something called the multiplier effect. And that is that women tend to invest more in the education of their children. When they have income disposable, they tend to invest more in the education of their children. That means that the next generation is going to be more educated, and that increases the socioeconomic benefit for the country.
What is the magnitude of the working woman around the world? How this changed in the past of few decades?
There are over 1 billion women across the world who are actually part of the global workforce, and this number continues to increase every day as women continue to make inroads in terms of their education, higher education, in terms of taking control of their own life, for example, deciding to have a child, to marry later or have a child a little bit later in life. And contraception has helped quite a bit in helping women get a little bit more control over their life and their decisions around their life, their personal lives.
Are there some areas of the world will see the greater impact from the working woman and then others?
Yes. The areas of the world where you'll see the most impact are those that are the most behind today. So where there are the largest gaps in terms of both inclusion, so participation, and in terms of advancement is where you will see the largest gains happening. So when you look at the third billion or the 865 million women, over 90% of them will come from the emerging world. About 90 million of them from the Middle East, about 590 million from Asia, and another 110 million from Africa.
I think you have covered the
next one.
Both the answers.
Yes, exactly.
So we no need to go for that.
Yes.
We were the brief, what's inputs and they are the importance.
Okay. So in our third billion index, we put inputs and outputs. So our third billion index is a composite of inputs and outputs. And inputs are actually the steps, the efforts that the policymakers, that the countries and the private sector, the companies have invested in economically empowering their women. And what we have as categories of inputs are education, so educating and preparing those women for employment. Access to market, everything that allows these women to actually participate in the economy, from maternity laws, etc., and entrepreneurial support.
Brief about that, what are the outputs and what do you tell about us?
Outputs represent the observable aspects of women's advancement in the national economy. And so what we categorize them as are inclusion or participation, are women actually working? And then advancement, are they reaching senior level professional management position? And equal pay for equal job on the ground. Is there discrimination happening? With these three categories of outputs, you can have a very clear understanding of how much the country is progressing in terms of women economic empowerment. And when we looked at the inputs and the outputs of our index, once we had ranked all the various countries, something very interesting showed up, which is that those countries who had invested substantially in their women, in economically empowering their women, were seeing the fruits of their labor in terms of commensurate outputs.
Okay, and now what are the cluster of the countries you found? 4 cluster of the countries you found, basically.
So we clustered the countries in 4 clusters. For those that are high input and high on output, we call those on the path to success. And there you will find the likes of Australia, Germany, the Nordic countries. Those have invested in the economic empowerment of their women and are seeking the benefits. They can all still improve because nobody has yet reached a perfect parity, but they are doing very well. There's a lot of lessons learned there. On the opposite quadrant is the low input, low output, where we've called them on the starting gate. And you will find most of the Arab countries, unfortunately, there, a few of the African countries as well there. And those are those countries that have not yet invested substantially in their women, significantly in their women, and are also, in terms of output, not seeing any advancement of the women in the economy.
What categories do you fall into that and why?
So the UAE is in the cluster of the starting gate. It rated 108th out of 128 countries. And that is because the national female labor participation is still quite low. We're at about 28% versus 64% approximately for national males in the UAE. Also, women, when they do work, primarily work in the public sector. They have not yet made enough inroads into the private sector. Maternity leave as well in the UAE is still quite low. However, the picture is changing very fast, and you can see that there's very strong leadership support. This could be seen from the recent announcement from Sheikh Mohammed about quotas for women on boards in companies in the UAE. And in my line of work, I've seen more and more women recently in public sector and sometimes in private sector really reaching leadership positions. So I'm quite optimistic about the UAE and the journey it's taking.
What's about that countries like Tanzania now?
So Tanzania ranked at 85 out of 128 countries. So it's also at the starting gate. Although a little bit closer to the average. Now, what's good in Tanzania, if you will, is that there's a very high level of female participation, about 85%. However, this masks a more depressing reality, which is that all of these women, or the majority of these women, are actually working in very low value jobs, or sometimes unpaid jobs in agricultural fields, etc. And this is a result of a multitude of factors. Some of it is education, so poor quality of a women's education, unfair division of labor in the home, where most of the burden is still on the women's shoulder, a lack of access to financial credit, often because they don't have collateral, they don't inherit land because of cultural or tribal customs. So all of that, and lack of business skills training as well. All of which means that they end up in those low-value jobs. Still, more recently, there's been a bit of a positive trend in Tanzania, and you see more and more women starting their own businesses, often out of necessity, and more women taking on some professional or jobs or leadership positions. But still a lot of work to be done on all fronts, from education, access to technology, access to finance, and entrepreneurial support.
What aspect did you find that related to the entrepreneurship supports for women, and what the importance of that?
There are multiple aspects that are very important in terms of entrepreneurial support, and they are actually part of the index. All of them are very important, and they all have to come together to make an ecosystem that is friendly for women in terms of entrepreneurship. Business training, access to technology, access to finance, mentoring, access to network, having the right role models, and also building the confidence of these young ladies.
What did you find the women access to the finance programs about?
What we found is that financial institutions tend to underserve the market of women-owned SMEs or women-owned companies in a large part of the emerging or developing countries. And the reasons for this are, there's a multitude of reasons for this. Part of it is because, for example, loans are based on collateral, and often case the women will not have land, she will not have inherited land, and therefore cannot get a loan. But also what we found is often there are some cultural biases from those financial officers who seem to believe that it's a higher risk proposition to loan to women, whereas in fact data shows it's actually the opposite in many cases. So those financial institutions who have noticed that this is an untapped market and that it's a high growth market have actually been reaping the benefits as they have been focusing on lending to women.
Were there any interest about the stories and activities for this particularly stuck when you completed research for this report? Quote any advocates or anything like that?
Yeah. I mean, there were so many interesting stories as we were working on this report, but one quote that stuck with me was from Sheryl Sandberg, the CEO of Facebook, where she said, you know, somebody was asking her, what is the most critical decision you can make for your career? And she said, the person you marry. And I completely identify with that. You need a very supportive spouse to be able to flourish in your career.
If you were in advertising and advising in financial institute, a commercial bank, would you think that the third billionaire concentrate them or terms like that? I mean, I made a mistake in the question. I mean.
Yeah. So if I were advising financial institutions, I'd open their eyes to this big opportunity that is the third billion and tell them that this is potentially their next source of big growth. Indeed, those banks that have been targeting women entrepreneurs in the SME market have seen a fast growth and have seen large financial rewards. In addition, you find that women tend to be slightly more loyal than men. So once they choose a bank, they will switch less easily. So the acquisition costs are lower. All in all, a very positive proposition.
I think then the last question is, what are the top 3 things they might do to see result their institutions and like local markets?
Yeah. So firstly, I think they should seek to partner with business organizations locally and try to gather as much data about these consumers that are women so that they can have really relevant data about their needs. What are those consumer needs? Second, they should look at non-conventional approaches to borrowing. Instead of looking for collateral, maybe you can ask for letters of personal guarantees or other ways to guarantee a loan that would be more applicable and more helpful to women. And third, also partner with technology providers to ensure that women have access to mobile banking, whether it's for saving, for borrowing, for insurance purposes. The more you get access to technology to these women who all have mobile phones now, the more you'll be able to enter that market and help them.
Thank you, Dr. Laila.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.